With all the success you've had, do you still face, are you currently facing any fears, or are there fears about the horizon?
Man, I have to give you amazing props. You're such a curious person about the people that you talk to. I love it. I love it, man.
Thank you.
The answer is, thank you. Are you kidding me? I've been on a ton of podcasts and people just same questions.
Welcome to the Idea Climbing Radio Show. Today we're talking about how to share your big idea in the media. And my guest is Mark Albert. He's the founder and CEO of Media Advisory Experts, a Washington, D.C.-based consultancy providing media training, crisis communications, earned media, storytelling, and video production services to his clients in the U.S. and around the globe. He and his team guide leaders on their path to amplify their stories in the media, coaching top executives from C-suite to founders. He's also a Peabody and EMMY award-winning master storyteller with a 25-year journalism career distinguished by investigative and political reporting, innovative storytelling techniques, and creative communications. And to top it off, Mark has been to 85 countries so far with a goal to visit them all. Thank you for making the time to be here, Mark. I appreciate it.
Well, last weekend I actually got to 86, so there's some breaking news for you.
Yes, an update. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I'd love to jump. There's a lot we can talk about. We're going to go through media and sharing your big idea in the media. As far as if someone's thinking like, okay, I know I'm going to need media attention, but they're just completely overwhelmed. What is a start? Well, before that, what's your story? I mean, a 25-year career in media. What's your story and why did you choose media for that long and to have success at it at that level?
You know, you say 25 years, and I got to tell you, Mark, I've got the gray hairs here on either side of my temple to prove it. But it was so rewarding, I have to tell you, being on a front seat to history, writing the first draft of history, as many people have said before me. I mean, I got to ask so many people questions. You know, journalism is kind of like a cloak. It allows you to go into so many different communities, go into so many different situations, and ask questions that in other countries would get people thrown in prison. And here in America, in the United States, you put on that cloak of a journalist and we can ask almost anybody anything. And it's really quite the privilege. And so I was so fortunate to cover journalism for 25 years, but then I decided that I needed a little bit of a sabbatical and I needed to recharge my creative batteries and do something a little bit different. And so I thought, what better way to recharge than to take all this knowledge that I've learned in 25 years and asking questions of top government leaders and people in the community and all that, and channel it into doing media training for executives and thought leaders and those who want to elevate their story and their brand in the media. We do crisis communication, so advising people. Right now, we're advising election administrators across the country that are dealing with a flood of misinformation and disinformation about America's voting system and whether there's widespread fraud. Fact check, hint, there's not, and all of those things. And so we do that. We do storytelling and earned media. And Mark, you know this. This is media that you earn through your expertise. You can't buy it. You can't buy a quote in the New York Times on the front page. You can't buy placement on the CBS Evening News in the news broadcast. But every day, journalists and communities across the country are looking for experts, doctors, financial advisors, realtors, those who are making a trouble living, who aren't making ends meet, even though they're making the minimum wage. All kinds of people, journalists need to hear from you every day. And so we advise people on how to get their expertise in front of journalists who are looking for that knowledge so they can bring it to listeners, readers, and viewers across the country. So it's been quite a journey for me. And, you know, I feel like I'm starting a new chapter, not another book, but a new chapter.
Well, with the new chapter, before we get into how to get media attention, I'd love to, because everyone, I think, in networking in the business world, in some way, shape, or form, even in a networking meeting one-on-one, you're kind of an interviewer. And it does come down to, I've heard something, I'm not going to get the quote exactly right, but something along the lines of sometimes the genius isn't in the answer, it's in the question. And you brought up, you have so much experience asking the right questions. Could you unpack that a little bit more? What makes a good question? How do you elicit the storytelling and the stories that you're talking about?
And that's a great question. Let me reveal a superpower. And this is not a superpower that only journalists have. This is a superpower that any one of us can have as we're asking questions. Do not be afraid to say you don't know. Don't be afraid to ask something that you are afraid makes you look dumb or uncultured or naive. Because as a journalist, we can't know a lot about a lot of things. We need to know a little bit about a lot of things so that we can convey that to the audience. And so you get really good as a journalist saying to the doctor who does brain surgery, look, I'm not a brain surgeon and I'll never be one. Can you explain this to me like you would tell your mother or your children or a class of 8th graders? And you're talking to some incredibly smart people when you're a journalist. And you just have to admit, look, I don't know about your world. I don't know what it's like to help build the space shuttle. Can you help explain that to me? And when they throw out terms that you don't know, in polite conversation, we tend to just nod along. You can't afford to do that as a journalist because you're going to get something wrong, right? When you're reporting. And so one of the superpowers that journalists get really good at is saying, I don't understand, or I don't know about that. Or can you help me explain this? Or you know what? I didn't understand when you explained that. Can you approach it a different way? Can you explain it to me like I'm a 10-year-old? And having that no fear of looking dumb is a superpower that I think more of us need to adopt. And so asking great questions has to do with not being afraid of looking dumb, of looking stupid. You're a journalist. You don't know about this topic. That's why you're interviewing the expert. So you shouldn't be afraid to say to an expert that you're interviewing, look, I don't understand. Can you help me understand that better? The second way that I would suggest getting better answers is not to ask yes or no questions, unless the caveat being for effect. You stole $10 million from the city. Will you resign? That's a yes or no question. And obviously you want to elicit a yes or no answer. Some politicians will dissemble and they'll give you 35 words and you have to then pin their feet to the fire and say, sir, I only asked you yes or no. Yes or no, will you resign? Right? But in the vast majority of instances, you don't want to ask a question that is going to only elicit a yes or no answer. You want to elicit a longer response. Take me inside your head. Take me inside of your thought process. Give me some color behind your knowledge. And so tip number 2 is don't ask a yes or no question unless you want a yes or no answer. And I would say tip number 3 is never fail to be curious. Mark, you exemplify this on your show. You're always curious. In your open, you have someone that compliments you for your curiosity. And I would say that's tip number 3 in asking great questions is never fail to be curious. And that has served me so well and so many of my journalism colleagues so well in their careers. Walter Cronkite was always curious. Edward R. Murrow was always curious. Tom Brokaw, Peter Jennings, Dan Rather, they were always incredibly curious. Katie Couric, I mean, there are so many amazing journalists that let their curiosity be their guide. And that is so, so key.
So let's look at the other side of the coin then we'll talk about getting getting the attention of the media. As far as when it comes to media, can you explain what good answers are like? Because this actually came up in a conversation on another show for my podcast of there's a difference between, the length that you give a keynote speech is different than a 60-minute podcast, is different than a 30-minute podcast, is different than a 5-minute news segment. What makes a good answer to the media? So once you get a hold of them, you can actually help them along. What does that look like?
Great question. Okay. They teach us in journalism schools, right? Any answer that your expert gives you that contains data, facts, just sort of objective knowledge, you want to strip that out and you want to paraphrase it, include it in a graphic, include it in your track, your words. Any answer that the expert gives you that has some sort of subjectivity or emotion or context, you want to include that as your soundbite. Why? Because the journalist is responsible for reporting the facts. So if the doctor tells you that the brain surgery took 6 hours and they operated this area, this area, this area, and the patient is going to be okay, that's all stuff the journalist can say. They don't need the doctor on camera or in a newspaper quote to say that. But when the doctor says it was a miracle that he got here in time when he did, if we had not operated in the next 60 minutes, this person would have been dead. And we got there just in the nick of time. And now they're going to lead a long and productive life. That's something I can't say as a journalist. Why? Because it's subjective. I have to be objective. And so the best sound bites, the best quotes for journalists are when you give them context, subjective answers, emotion, passion, etc., because the journalists themselves can't say that. The journalist isn't going to say, it was just in the nick of time. It's lucky he's alive. That's best for the doctor to say or the family member to say. And so when you are doing interviews with journalists, yes, give them the facts. Absolutely. But the money soundbite, as we would say, is something that only you as the expert can deliver. Only you, because of your expertise, your context, your relation to the topic at hand, your personality. Give the journalist something that only you can deliver.
So now we're on the question of Q&A, if you will. Could you unpack storytelling? Because I know that's something that we spoke about a little bit. It's in your resume, your introduction. What is good storytelling?
Good storytelling is telling me something I don't know and letting it be memorable. And so let's unpack that, as you say. Of course, we learn in elementary school, a good story has a beginning, middle, and an end. That is the same whether you're writing an essay for your fourth grade class or your dissertation or a public speech to 30 people or a public speech to 10,000. What's your beginning, what's your middle, and what's your end? And actually, I've developed this tip sheet, 6 tips to be a better public speaker. And we talk in that tip sheet all about storytelling. First, I advise people to start with humor, right? That's always great. But then what is the story that you're going to identify? If you think of memorable speeches or memorable presentations, maybe it's the most memorable Oscars acceptance speech or the most memorable speech at a political convention. They always have a story, a relatable story that is almost an allegory, that has a broader theme that the speaker then works into the rest of their presentation. So when it comes to storytelling, what in your own life has been an allegory, a parable, something that you can take a greater meaning from that individual story and use it to further your goals of your answer, your presentation, your speech, etc. And Mark, if I may divert just for a second here, if you want that tip sheet, 6 tips for telling stories and being a better public speaker, just text the word media to 33777. 33777 33777. You'll get my tip sheet. But what you identified there is key, which is identify a story. Tell a great story. And a great story is going to be memorable, and it's going to represent something larger than just the story itself.
Well, let's back up a little bit before the storytelling takes place. If someone's saying, I know I need to be in the media, people are telling me I do, but they just feel like, boosh, they did some research and it's like, there's like 20 directions I could go in. What's your guidance for people that are in that boat of, I don't even know what to do. I don't know what I don't know. How do they start to be able to approach the media?
Sure. And so many people, Mark, thinks that this is so daunting. But I'm going to pull back the curtain for you right now, and I'm going to tell you the secret that being 25 years in journalism has taught me. Every single day, and I would actually say every single hour, there is a journalist somewhere that is looking for the expertise that you possess. Maybe they've been assigned a story at 9 a.m. and they have to turn it for the 5 o'clock news. Maybe they're assigned a story at noon and it has to be in the print edition, and that goes to press at 8 p.m. Whatever it is, there are journalists every single day in every community in the country that has a newsroom that is flipping through their virtual Rolodex, trying to find someone with expertise. Maybe they've been assigned a story to cover the race for the White House. Maybe they've been assigned to cover Jimmy Carter, revealing that he has a certain type of cancer, and they want to know more about that type of cancer. Maybe it's someone doing a story because Katie Couric was brave enough to elevate the fact that her late husband had a colon cancer, and she is elevating the public mind that you've got to get checked for colon cancer. And whatever it happens to be, the journalist is trying to find experts. Because remember what I said, Mark, a journalist knows a little bit about a lot of things, not a lot of it, a lot about a lot of things. And so the journalist is trying on deadline to find expertise. So number one, you have to identify what is your expertise. Mark, for you, you're a successful podcast host. You're a radio show host. You've got all these great accomplishments. You can add value to the journalists when they're writing about public speaking and podcasts and radio shows and all that stuff. If you're a teacher, my goodness, you have so much expertise on education. If you're a librarian, so much expertise. We all possess expertise. Maybe it's about cooking, maybe it's about painting, maybe it's about gardening, maybe it's about something else. Number one, what is your expertise? Don't pick 20 things. What is it that you're most passionate about and you have the most experience? Number two, you need to build up a foundation of thought leadership. What do I mean? If you love to garden, but you haven't done it for a profession, you haven't done it with clients, you haven't written about it on LinkedIn, you haven't written about it on gardening blogs, then where is the foundation that a journalist is going to feel comfortable enough that, oh yes, look at, they have been quoted or written these pieces, they've done all this experience. It's proof of performance, essentially. And so number two, how can you prove to the journalist that you're really an expert in this? And so if you're looking to be quoted in the future, let's say you're a realtor, right? And you've sold houses for 15 years, you've got a track record of selling those homes. Now, I would suggest if you hired our firm, Media Advisory Experts, let's build up your thought leadership. Where are your blog posts? Where are your articles? Do you have a newsletter? Are you posting constantly on social media? Are you doing video clips, et cetera? How are you building your base of expertise so that when a journalist calls or when you reach out to them, you've got clips to send them. You've got proof of performance. Number four, once you have all those things, how are you reaching out to journalists? If you're going to sit there waiting for a journalist to call you, it's like lightning strike, right? There's 330 million people in America. And how often is that going to happen? Sure, some journalists may see you're posting your thought leadership, your expertise as you're posting various content on different social media platforms, but you need to proactively reach out to the journalist. The best way to do this, Mark, and so many people overlook it, is when news happens that you can shine a light on, that's your moment to strike. For example, many of us have heard about the Blockbuster settlement with the with the Realtors Association, the National Association of Realtors, and how that's going to change home buying and selling in communities across America, right? The sacrosanct 6% commission, 3% goes to the seller's agent, 3% go to the buyer's agent. That's going away, right? It's not guaranteed anymore. Later this year, that's going to be a huge, huge change. So if I'm a realtor and that announcement came out this morning, what am I doing? I'm calling journalists to say, hey, this announcement just came out. It's going to have this impact for your listeners, readers, and viewers. And here's the important context that I can add to this story. And so that's what we work with on our clients. They come to us saying, I got this great expertise. I want to be quoted on the media. Maybe they saw somebody in their profession quoted and they thought, oh my gosh, I could do better than that person. And what we do is we identify, what is your expertise? What is your story? Where's your thought leadership? And then who can we target in newsrooms that would be receptive to your expertise? And crucially, as I just said, when can we target them? Jumping on breaking news is a great hook.
So when it comes to thought leadership, you mentioned a few things. That's another thing to unpack or get into a little bit more. Where does it start? I mean, is it social media posts? It could be so many things. The blog, videos. If someone's saying, okay, I need to establish this, is it pick a niche and stick with it on social and then go to blogs? Does it go to the news? Does it start short videos? What ways can you develop thought leadership and establish yourself as a thought leader?
Simple. What do you enjoy doing the most? Do you enjoy posting on LinkedIn? Do you enjoy creating a website on, for example, Wix? Do you want to go on X and do the new X Spaces and all of that with video? What are you most comfortable about? What do you get the most engagement from people on the social media platform? Is it the new Blue Sky? Is it Threads? What do you enjoy doing? Where do you enjoy doing it? And where do you get the most engagement? That's where I would start, Mark, because that's going to make you passionate about it. You're going to get positive reinforcement by seeing that engagement. Start building wherever you feel comfortable, where you may already have an audience. And if you don't have an audience, where are others in your industry posting? Is TikTok really big in your industry? Is it LinkedIn? Is it Facebook? Is it something else? Where are other people that you want to emulate posting? And then I would post there.
How do you know what kind of brand to build? For example, you love gardening and that's what you love to do. That's what you're great about, but it's a hobby. Is that what you talk about because that's what you love? Or is it pick something you're passionate about in business or start a business around your passion? How do you marry the two where it's like, well, if it's just a hobby, it's not going to advance my business or help me grow professionally. What do you do in that scenario?
So let's say that you're a brain surgeon and you love gardening. Is that kind of an example?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. So if you're a brain surgeon and you love gardening, and you're known for your brain surgery, I'm so sorry, but most journalists are going to want to talk to you because of your expertise on brain surgery. Now, that being said, if you're doing amazing at gardening, You launched the gardening club in Columbus, Ohio, and you've got all these people now joining. You're doing 30-second TikTok videos every day on one gardening tip. Maybe you'll be known as the brain surgeon who's also a gardener. And so it is conceivable that you could build up that brand as well. But typically journalists are looking for someone who's really have an established expertise in one area. Not to say you can't be multi-talented, but you need to focus on what is the one expertise that you want to get in front of journalists.
And when you want to get in front of them, how do you find them? I mean, is it LinkedIn or their directories people should know about? How do you find the people just to get in touch with them in the first place?
So there are so many ways. I'm a big fan of starting local. I reported in local communities across America, from Los Angeles to Redding, California, Chico, California, Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, Michigan, Minneapolis, Washington, D.C., and the national at CBS News and Hearst. And I would say start local. In many local communities, you've got several TV stations that are probably doing news. You've got an NBC affiliate, an ABC affiliate, a CBS affiliate, a Fox, a CW. Most CWs aren't doing news. You've got radio. Maybe you've got a national public radio affiliate. Maybe you've got talk radio, news radio. You've got online websites more than ever before. The Texas Tribune, MinnPost in Minnesota, Stat News, so many these days that are niche publications that are focusing on one area or the other. You've got newspapers, all of these different areas. And so, here I get 3 newspapers delivered to my door every day, and you can go through there online, in print, find reporters who cover that subject area. So if I'm doing gardening, I'm going to look, of course, who writes in the gardening section of my local newspaper or regional paper. Or if there's a gardening segment, I used to work at KSTP Television, ABC affiliate in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and we would have a gardening segment on, almost every day. And so who are the reporters, the journalists that are covering the area of your expertise? That's who you want to start reaching out to. I would hate it, Mark, when I was an investigative journalist running the national investigative unit at Hearst Television. So that's going to all Hearst TV stations, that's going to newspapers, radio. And I would hate it when I would get a news release, best 5 sunscreens for summer. And I'm an investigative journalist. I'm uncovering fraud, waste, and abuse. Unless your sunscreen is fraud, waste, or abuse, I really don't want to hear about what the 5 best sunscreens are for summer. Maybe for my personal use, because I burn easily, but it's not a story for my unit. That's not my beat. So my tip, Mark, would be if you've got an expertise in something, find the journalists who are writing about it.
Is there as far as easier access, if I'm using the term right, is there a good place to start? Like newspapers are generally easier to find or get a hold of people, or the columnists that have their email. Actually, is there a certain spot you would say for path of least resistance? Here's an idea of who to start targeting.
Sure. Well, once you find the journalists that write about your area of expertise, then of course, look for a contact information online. Many of the bylines, right? The name of the people who wrote the articles, those are hyperlinked now to an email that populates. If not, there's always a contact us page on reputable news organizations. You can contact the info desk. TV station newsrooms in markets around the country, they have what's called an assignment desk. So just call the station, say, hi, can you transfer me to the desk? Yes, that's what it's actually called, the desk. And then just say, hey, I'm looking for the reporter that covers real estate or medical issues or gardening, et cetera. And Mark, if I could just say this, because we've kind of touched on it briefly, you'll notice that I couch my language sometimes. Most communities in America, or many TV stations, have this. We have an issue, a problem, a very scary problem in America right now is many communities have news deserts. In other words, independent media organizations have closed over the last 20 years. Something like half of all newspapers in America have disappeared in the last 20 years. Journalism staffing is down by like 50%. This is a crisis for democracy, and it's a crisis for having an informed citizenry. The reason so many people are being duped these days by misinformation and disinformation is because they're not consuming mainstream news. They're not consuming news with context that's fairly reported, that adheres to journalistic principles, that is objective. Instead, they're only seeking out news that seeks to validate and reemphasize what they already believe. And so in these communities, not everyone now has a local newspaper. Not everyone has an independent source of media. In those cases, you are going to have to go further afield. If you're getting your news from Facebook, if you're getting your news from a social media platform your family's never heard of, if you're not relying on independent journalism that relies on principles and ethics and structures, then you're polluting your information stream. And so I can't emphasize enough, if you care about information, if you care about facts, and if you care about an informed citizenry and a democracy, subscribe to a local news outlet.
So once you figure out your niche, your thought leadership, have somewhat of a platform, once you get into the media, how do you maintain it so you're not just a flash in the pan here, not 6 months from now another flash in the pan? How can you build yourself up, even if it's on a nominal level, to become more of a media personality on a consistent basis, even if it's weekly, monthly, something like that? So it's not just, oh, I got a story, now I don't know what to do next. How do you maintain media exposure?
Okay, so let's talk about what some people are doing wrong, and then we'll answer your question as how to do it right. And I cover this when I come and speak to groups and companies and organizations. And they say, well, we hired this really expensive PR firm and we paid a bunch of money and they sent out 250 news releases on our behalf and no journalists called. We didn't get any calls. What happened? What's wrong? Okay, what's wrong is that you're not taking the steps you need to do, because so many people that are trying to get in front of journalists are pitching their brand, they're pitching their product, they're pitching their company. And I want you to forget all of that. I want you to stop doing that. Do not pitch a journalist your brand, your company, your product, unless you're like Apple or Google. Otherwise, forget it. What you need to be pitching, and this is the secret sauce, Mark, what you need to be pitching is your expertise and the value that you can add to a journalist's audience. A journalist is not there to give you publicity, and a journalist is not there to simply cover your story to increase your sales. A journalist's job is to identify information and news that's value to their audience. So for example, if you are the realtor, what did I suggest? I suggested contacting a local media outlet for how the settlement with the National Association of Realtors is going to change how everybody buys and sells a home. 5 tips. That's value. Contacting a journalist and saying, hi, I've got a slow month right now, and please hire me to represent you selling your home. That's not going to do it. If I'm a brain surgeon and someone really famous has brain surgery, journalists around the country are going to be calling doctors to find out, what does this mean? How can someone prevent this from happening to their loved ones, etc. If I'm a doctor, proactively, the moment I see that in the news and hear about it, I'm going to draft a post. Maybe it's my LinkedIn, maybe it's my website. 3 things to know about colon cancer, 5 ways to detect, a brain tumor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And then you send that out to journalists because that's the value you can add to their audiences. But so many people, Mark, think that the same message they pitch to their customers, the same message they pitch to their investors, the same message they pitch to their employees is the message to pitch to journalists. And it's not. You need a different message to pitch to journalists. And you need to forget your brand, your company, and your product. Instead, you need to think, what can I pitch that will bring value to that news organization's listeners, readers, and viewers? And Mark, that's something that so many people get wrong. That's why they hire us to fix it.
So how do you know when you're ready to go from pitching journalists on your own to more PR firms, as far as actually hiring a PR firm? At what level should it be you be thinking, okay, maybe it's time to invest in a PR firm now instead of trying to do this on my own?
Sure. And that's a great question. One way I would say is if you can't handle the number of requests that are now coming in, so you need a triage. Essentially, you're a victim of your own success and you've got so many journalists contacting you, then you might need someone to handle all that for you and coordinate. The other one is if you're not getting results that you want, then you need to contact someone for help. It's not cheap. We work with several PR firms that specialize in different things. So we are we don't do PR. We're not a traditional PR firm. Instead, we get our clients ready for their PR opportunities. So if you were to contact us, first I would say, okay, what is your one expertise? Then we would look to build the foundation, craft the story, do media training with you to make sure that you're going to maximize your moment, then craft your story pitch, sort of give you that entire silver plate, if you will, to be ready for that, and then partner with a PR firm to blast that out to media organizations. So I would say, one, if you're being inundated by media inquiries, great job. That's when you might need a PR firm to help. And two, if you're not getting any and you want more and you can't do it on your own, then you need to hire someone.
How do you vet PR firms to avoid, like you just said, 250 press releases go out, there's no response? When it's done right, what does the traditional PR firm actually do when it's done right?
So when it's done right, you get placements in publications or media outlets that move the needle for you. What do I mean by that? I had somebody the other day tell me that they wanted X number of stories in top tier media. Okay, we can try to get you quoted in the New York Times, but if you're selling gardening equipment in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, how many New York Times readers in Milwaukee, Wisconsin are going to come to your gardening store? Would it be better if we targeted local media in Milwaukee? Would it be better if we did some other things? So people are very hung up on the exact placements they want. And some PR firms may say, oh, look, we got so-and-so quoted in the New York Times. We sent out 250 news releases. We got them quoted in 10 newspapers, or they were on the morning show. Okay, great. But is that what I need? Is that what I need for my brand, for my company? Is that going to move the needle for me? Is that going to increase engagements with my brand, my company, et cetera? Because getting quoted in the New York Times sounds great, but it's not for everybody. So what I ask clients when they come to us with that is, wait. Forget the name of the outlet. Tell me what your goal is. What are you trying to accomplish? And then we'll build backwards from there. Don't come to me telling me you want to get quoted on CNBC, you want to be on Squawk Box, right? Tell me instead, what is the expertise? What are you trying to accomplish? What's your message? And then we can figure out the best way to go about it. But unfortunately, a lot of people are hung up on names, I think. And so if you are looking for a PR firm and they're coming at you with, look, we got all of our people quoted in these outlets and we sent out this number of news releases. Okay, but I don't care. I care about, did you get results for those clients? Can you show me the engagements? Can you show me where their sales went up? Can you show me where they got more client leads? That's the proof in the pudding. That's the proof of performance. Not the number of outlets you got quoted in, not the level of publications you got quoted in, but did you get results? If you got quoted in the New York Times every day, Monday through Friday, and you got no more clients and you have no more sales, that was a fail, right? But people are blinded by the fancy lights, and they are blinded by these pitches, I think, that they get from these big PR firms sometimes. And so I would simply tell people, when you're looking for a PR firm, you need to be looking at what are their results, not where do they get their clients quoted, because you need to make sure you're getting the results you want and you need.
Well, it sounds like to get the results you want, you have to have an effective story. As far as storytelling goes, where's the line between I have to go one end of the spectrum, I have to craft, I'm responsible for crafting my own story, and then I'll go to a PR firm to amplify it? Or is it, I know what my thought leadership is, or my one thing I love, and I can rely on a PR firm to write the story and spread it? Or is there somewhere in the middle? I mean, between I write it, they amplify it, they write it and amplify it. What does that look like in reality?
The answer is
expect?
The answer is C, all of the above. So,
okay.
Yeah. So some clients, they have everything and they just need amplification. They need you to make contact with different media organizations, and other people need it from the ground up. And it's okay, because there are many flavors in the ice cream store, and there are many flavors of public relations and media training and engagement and storytelling. So it just depends on the individual client. Everybody is different.
So what would be an example of what you do when someone comes to you and they need help crafting it? What steps do you take as far as, okay, we're going to get you media ready?
Sure. So first of all, it depends what niche are they in, right? What industry are they in, and how far are they along in the journey that you just described? In other words, do they know what their message is, right? And remember what I said, not what you tell your employees, not what you tell your customers, not what you tell your investors. Do you know what your message is to journalists? Do you have your expertise identified? Do you have your story pitch crafted? Do you have your messaging ready? And have you had media training? We can do all of those other parts. And when you get your shot on a newscaster with a journalist and you blow it because you didn't have media training, then that's sort of a fail, right? And so it would be a shame not to execute at the end. And so we make sure all those steps are in a line, and then with our clients, and then we decide, okay, where is it best to place them? Do we need to put you with a traditional PR firm? Maybe we need to put you with a branding and marketing firm first, clarify where you are. And then we have some clients we work with. We've got this great partnership with ELO Branding, and they separate the person from the brand or the company. So in other words, a lot of thought leaders and executives are in powerful positions at really well-known companies that your listeners would know right away. But they want to separate themselves out, and they want to elevate their own brand with their own thought leadership. And so we work with them on distilling what is their core message, not the company they've been identified with for 10 or 15 years. And what is their expertise? What is their story? What is their story pitch? And then how can we get them elevated, whether it's on podcasts, radio shows like yours, panel events, speaking events, media opportunities and engagements, things like that. So it runs the gamut. But when someone comes to us, I want to go to the ground floor and I want to build back up.
So you mentioned it a couple of times. Can you give a couple examples of when it comes to media training, what are examples of what most people need to be able to change or up their game at doing? What is that? What does that look like with media training?
Sure. So it's very important that someone has a basic understanding of how media and journalists work if you're going to effectively have a media engagement. And unfortunately, a lot of people think they do because they read the newspaper, but they don't actually understand how the newspaper is made. Or they listen to National Public Radio, but they don't know how the journalism gets on the air. And so every media training that I do starts with Media 101. And inevitably, Mark, that is the most interesting portion of my media training. It's a full day. And that's where I get the most questions, because it is a revelation to these executives, these thought leaders, these entrepreneurs. They never knew how the news was created, how it was made, how it got into their television set, how did it get online when they go onto a website. And so we explain what Media 101 is so that you understand what's happening behind the scenes, so that you understand the terminology, and you can then pivot and make sure that you are approaching that journalist in a way that is going to be helpful to them and add value to their audience. So we do Media 101. How does the media work in the United States? That gives you a better idea of how you can capitalize on it. We talk about story pitches. How in the world do you craft a story for a journalist? We talk about terminology. What is a journalist actually asking for when they use this term, when they ask for this? How to create the elements proactively that a journalist needs, so they don't have to ask you or your assistant or your PR firm for them in advance. We make sure all of that is already in a Dropbox link or a Google Drive account or something, so that you have it. We talk about your messaging, right? Let's take an example. So when I was at CBS News, we would do an interview maybe for a half hour on camera. The average piece on the CBS Evening News is about 1 minute and 40 seconds. So if I'm going to do an interview for 30 minutes and I practice my core message and I'm going to say it once, well, there's 29 other minutes in that interview. How am I going to increase the odds that my message is conveyed in that 1 minute and 40 second piece on the CBS Evening News? Well, it is crafting one message and figuring out different ways to say it so that you thread it throughout the interview, so you have a greater chance of it being used. So we work on messaging. We work on pivoting. What if a journalist says something to you and it's uncomfortable or it doesn't highlight what you want it to highlight? You don't want to just say, I don't want to answer that, or the dreaded no comment. How do you pivot to what you do want to say? So it's this whole intensive course. We do that basically the workshop portion in the morning. And then I bring in a network level television camera crew with all the lights and all the cameras. And we sit you down and I do a mock on camera interview with you. We practice what we just learned, no stops. So you either sink or swim. And then I connect my laptop to a monitor. We play it back and we go through it, reviewing what did they do great? What can they improve upon? And then we go back for a second bite of the apple and we do it again. And inevitably the improvement is incredible in that second go around. And so that's kind of what composes our media training. We did it for a $6 billion company a couple of weeks ago. We've done it for smaller firms, thought leaders, one-on-one. That's how we try and build either a company or an organization or a person with that media training skill so they can maximize their opportunities.
We've covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. someone watching or listening and they're thinking, okay, a lot of this makes sense. If you were to say, I want to share my big idea in the media, I think I'm ready to do this. If you were to say, above all, whether it's reinforcing something you've already said or something we might not have touched on yet, if you say, look, at least do this one thing, at least this, what would you tell them to do?
You must identify what value you are bringing to the journalist's audience. It's not enough to say you're launching the super duper 7,000 plus product next week. They don't care unless you're launching Apple iPhone 26, right? But by and large, what is the value? If colonoscopies are in the news, the top 5, symptoms you need to know to prevent cancer in your family. If real estate is in the news, top 5 things buyers and sellers need to know today. If gardening is in the news, top 10 gardening tips for spring. Right? What is the value that you're adding? And so many of my clients, they say, no, I want to hold that tight. I don't want to give away my value. That's why my customers come to me. That's not how it works. You need to provide value for the audience. And so if I had to say one thing that a lot of people struggle with, Mark, it's that they don't want to reveal the value, or they think something that's value to them should be a value to the journalist. And that's just not the way it works. Not the way it works. And so whether it's coming to us because you need help with your messaging, with your story crafting, identifying what is your value, or doing media training, all of it is a holistic part. You have to do all of it to be successful in getting your message out.
Thank you so much for the time. If people want to find you online, where's the best place or places to go?
Sure. 2 things I'm really excited about. One, you can find us at mediaadvisoryexperts.com. mediaadvisoryexperts.com, or just text the word media to 33777. That's 33777. And I'm so excited to announce on your show, we are having a live event in September, Media Mastery Experts Live. It is an intensive, in-person, 2-day media training camp here in Washington, D.C., where I am now. We're going to bring together guest speakers from around the world. We're going to do sessions on public speaking, story crafting, how to get in front of journalists, how to identify your value and your messaging. We're going to do a mock interview with me, Mark, on set, on an anchor desk across the street from the White House. We're going to do a mock podcast as well. We've got a public speaking, we've got a speakers bureau leader coming. She's going to talk about what it takes to be represented by a speakers bureau. We've got a body language and voice expert coming, personal branding and marketing. Super excited. We're about to open registrations. It's going to be in September, the second weekend in September. If you want more details and our tip sheet on how to craft a great story in public speaking, text the word media to 33777.
Thank you again so much, Mark. This has been excellent.
Mark, it was a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
And scene. Thank you for tuning into the Idea Climbing radio show today. I really appreciate it. I hope you got something great out of it that you can take into your own life and use to be better in your own life. If you want more great shows like this, go to 216thenet.com. You want to see more of my interviews, radio show, and podcast? Go to markjcartertv.com. Again, that's markjcartertv.com and 216thenet.com.